Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is CJ, the Populist New Yorker, and today we're going to be looking at the New York 2022 governor's race. Now, this is going to be the start of a series in which we look at all of the governor's races in 2022 that are not a sure bet for either party, or the toss-up races in this case, although they're not really toss-ups, but anything that's not a sure bet for either party. And in today's video, we're going to be focusing exclusively on the state of New York, and I'll be making these videos from now until 2022 periodically, and some of these videos will have follow-ups if the dynamic of the race changes. Like, for instance, if in New York something in the race drastically changes, I will make a follow-up. But in the case that doesn't happen, we're just going to stick to one video per state on this topic. So if we look at the 2022 governor's race, it's really down to just two candidates right now. Incumbent governor Andrew Cuomo on the Democratic side. He has no declared opposition. He has some people that have expressed interest in running against him. So far, that has not happened. And of course, we have the Republican primary. There are two declared opponents. There's Mike Carpinelli, who's the Lewis County sheriff, which is a county in upstate New York. He's more of a minor candidate. And Lee Zeldin, who seems to be the front runner for the Republican nomination. At least half of the county GOP sheriffs have endorsed him for governor already. So far, his race has really gained a lot of traction. Again, out of the people that have publicly expressed interest, I haven't heard any definites yet for any of them running. None from Mark Molinaro, who was the nominee in 2018, Rob Astorino, the nominee in 2014, etc. So if we look at how New York typically votes, at least in general, presidentially, it's a very Democratic state. Joe Biden won the state of New York by 23 points. If we go to 2016, that margin wasn't a whole lot different. Hillary Clinton won the state by around 23 points. So the margin didn't really change all that much. 22, really, if you want to be technical. Joe Biden actually did improve on Hillary Clinton's overall margin. However, Donald Trump also improved on his margin. Hillary Clinton only got 59%. Joe Biden got 60.9%, which is about average of what you'd expect a Democrat to get in New York nowadays. Of course, Democratic strongholds in the state of New York are obviously New York City, heavily Democrat. Out of the 5 boroughs of New York City, only one of them, Staten Island, votes Republican. The rest are solidly Democratic. Queens, which was once sort of Republican, maybe 40, 50 years ago, is no longer the case, although it is still the reddest borough outside of Staten Island. Long Island is also another really populated area, Long Island and Westchester. Overall, Long Island is technically lean blue if you average Nassau County and Suffolk County. Suffolk County went to Donald Trump last time by around 6 points or so. This time around, it was, I believe Trump only won it by over 200 votes, so very close in Suffolk County. Nassau County tends to be more Democratic, went to Joe Biden by around 10 points. And in 2016, Hillary won this by around 6. So overall, Long Island is still slightly Democratic leaning. I think I meant to say 7 points in Suffolk, not 6 for Trump. This time around, obviously, got bluer. If we look at the shift from 2016, the areas that shifted blue this presidential election was upstate New York. And this is relevant for off-year elections like the governor's race, which I'll get to later on in the video. And if we go to like 2012, for instance, the 2020 map has a lot more in common with the 2016 map, in the sense that this stretch of New York, eastern New York, bordering New England, is blue again. In 2016, most of it was turned red, very slightly, quickly snapped back. Now, if we look at the last governor's race New York had in 2018, these counties went Republican. Not by a lot, but some significantly. Of course, if we have Rensselaer County, I think that's how you say that, barely went to Donald Trump in 2016, went to Biden in 2020 by a fair amount. In 2018, it went solidly Republican, 53-39. So usually in off-year races, upstate New York tends to be more Republican. Again, if we go back to 2012 even, some of these upstate counties were voting for Democrats by high 20% margins. That is no longer the case, at least in terms of the 2018 governor's election. Now, Mark Molinaro is from upstate. Again, if you're from New York, that's debatable because he's from Dutchess County. From my perspective, he's upstate, but for many upstate, he's not actually upstate. But sometimes where the nominee comes from is relevant, but it ultimately doesn't affect the race too much. If we go to the 2014 governor's election in New York, we could see that Andrew Cuomo only won by 14%, and 2014 was considered a sort of low point for him. There was a lot of corruption scandals going on in state government. Certainly didn't look on him favorably. So ultimately, he was viewed less favorable in 2014. However, despite this unpopularity, he still won by around a 13-point margin, 13.4% margin. The third party did really well in this election. And something interesting, a lot of what makes the election isn't necessarily these upstate counties, which went blue in 2014. It's down here. It's the margins that you get in Westchester County, which is the home county of Rob Astorino, who is the Republican nominee, which probably led to him losing the county by a lot less than your typical Republican. Looking at Suffolk County, again, this is a county with 1.5 million people. The county barely went to Rob Astorino by a point. I don't know why that just reset. And again, you could see Nassau County, honestly, more blue than it was in the 2016 election. But in order for a Republican to win the state of New York, they have to win all of these counties pretty comfortably. They have to win Suffolk County. They'll have to win Nassau County. They'll have to win Rockland County. They'll have to win basically every county upstate. They're not going to win a place like Albany, although Albany did get really close because of the Howie Hawkins vote. But probably have to win places like Rochester, even Syracuse, in order to win the state. And you have to win these other rural New York counties by pretty big margins. Buffalo. Interesting thing about Syracuse, it actually went red in 2020 in the House race, albeit barely by, I think it was like less than a point. But that goes to show you that there is some malleable vote here for Republicans in off years and for non-presidential elections. However, the type of Republicans that New York used to elect in the past, Rockefeller, George Pataki, these were much more moderate centrist Republicans than the likes of someone like Lee Zeldin, who is a staunch Trump ally. And while that may be a good strategy in certain swing states and certainly red states, it's not really a good strategy to pull in the state of New York. New York is a very Democratic state. It's one of the most Democratic states in the country. Even taking out New York City, New York is a swing state at best. It's not red. Some people think that upstate New York is homogenous and that it's very Republican, but these maps bear out otherwise. There are still sizable blue pockets of population that vote pretty fairly Democratic. In order for anybody to win this state or even have a chance, they have to do very well in these pockets, but they also have to do well on Long Island and, of course, Westchester, Rockland area. Staten Island, obviously. Any Republican that can't win Staten Island has zero chance. And the dynamics of the 2022 election with Corona, with all these things going on, the nursing homes scandal, the sexual assault scandal, all of these other things, probably will affect Cuomo negatively, but I don't see it actually hindering his chance at winning the state. I think some things, particularly for Lee Zeldin, again, a Trump Republican, there is a certain ceiling that Republicans of that type hit in New York, and it's not very high. I'd say 40%, in my estimate, would be the high point. I don't think the race is actually competitive, although Lee Zeldin has raised a lot of money to his credit. But I don't think at the end of the day that's going to contribute to him actually winning the governor's mansion. We haven't elected a Republican in the state of New York since 2002. So that just goes to show you how partisan the state is. That's 18 years. And, many people point to Mario Cuomo, who he lost his reelection in 1994. In fact, we can go look at that right now. Looking at the Mario Cuomo versus George Pataki map, some things are very clear. Upstate New York is very, very Republican. These counties we were looking at in 2018. A lot of these northern counties are red, which they are in 94 as well. Not by a lot, probably by 10, 20 points at most. But look at Long Island, 10 or 20 points red. Westchester goes to George Pataki. Rockland County goes to George Pataki. These are population centers that are very important. Republicans can afford to lose Albany and maybe Rochester, some of these other areas. But ultimately, you don't have a lot of room if you're a Republican running statewide New York. You have to win basically the entire state besides New York. And, you know, you have Staten Island, you have Rockland County, Putnam, Dutchess, these areas which have sizable populations. Republicans really have to run up the margins. If we look at some of the other maps, 98, George Pataki was able to do that successfully. Again, he was already a fairly popular governor, very moderate governor, and he ended up winning a lot of these suburban counties on Long Island by an even larger margin, you know, being able to crack 40% in Queens, or almost. Same in Westchester, a very impressive feat, actually being able to win Westchester, which today for Republicans is nearly impossible. But it just goes to show you that when Republicans win New York, they essentially have to win the entire state, similar to an Illinois situation. They have to win the entire state but the city, and this map here, the 1998 map, is a perfect example of that. This is really the only realistic way Republicans can actually win the state of New York nowadays, is by winning all of upstate and cracking good margins in New York City as well. Do I think it's possible today? It's very, very unlikely. Even given what's going on at the moment with Andrew Cuomo, there's still, you know, a year and a half to go, and he could certainly make up a lot of ground with the voters in New York. Again, by party registration, I'm pretty sure New York is 50% Democrat, like a quarter Republican, and then the rest are independents. So already Democrats by default win in the state based on party line alone. So a Republican victory is very, very unlikely, even given the circumstances. Again, this kind of map today is very hard to achieve given how partisan, you know, the divide between rural and urban has gotten. All the urban counties here are blue, and they're blue by around 10 points, 7 points, what have you, but they're still blue counties. And this is where the population centers are in upstate New York. Most of the smaller rural counties don't have a whole lot of people. Long Island, same thing. Long Island tends to be a little bit more swingy, but generally backs Democrats if you average Nassau and Suffolk counties together. So my final verdict on the state of New York for 2020, well, I should say final verdict, but my verdict as of right now is that New York will, at the end of the day, be a safe Democratic state. I think Andrew Cuomo is probably going to win minimum by 15 points, maximum maybe 20 points, 21 points. I think it's going to be closer because it is an off-year election and Republicans will probably have a bit of an edge. There'll be some Democrats that don't want to vote for Cuomo, vote third party, perhaps for the Green Party, but I don't think it's going to be a significant amount to where you're actually going to see a Republican win. And again, we're not talking about George Pataki running for a fourth term again in 2022 as New York governor. This is Lee Zeldin, again, a very close Trump ally. Trump was not a popular president in the state of New York. And certainly Democrats are going to throw that toward Lee Zeldin or any Republican that actually ends up being the nominee, whether it's him or the sheriff guy. They're going to be used against them. So already that is another thorn. If Lee Zeldin was more of a independent, liberal Republican, he would certainly have a much higher chance, especially given his name recognition. Although one could argue his name recognition is because of the controversy he's had in the House. So anyway, guys, that's basically my breakdown of New York's governor's race. I think it's going to be safe Democratic when it's all said and done. There's going to be a lot of talk, as there always is, in blue states of, getting rid of the Democrats and voting them out. But usually that's mostly just in right-wing bubbles. And when you actually objectively look at these kind of races, they're very, very hard to win for Republicans. Democrats, these are very Democratic states. It's the equivalent of saying of Democrats thinking they were going to knock off Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. It's the same kind of mindset. Just because you dislike somebody so much does not mean they're destined to lose because you dislike them. But that's basically it. That's my breakdown. Leave this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Comment down below your thoughts. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.